All right.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Mid-Atlantic Regional NATS workshop titled The Three Pillars of Voice, a Foundation of Vocal Wellness Post-COVID. I'm Ethan Watermeyer, Board President of Maryland DC NATS, and it's my pleasure to welcome our special guest presenter today, Dr. Bradley Williard. Dr. Williard's approach looks at voice quality as a reflection of the unique coordination between breath, body, and heart. He trained at the Ilse Middendorf Institute for the Perceptible Breath in Berlin, Germany, and is certified in the principle of breathing coordination by Carl Stau. Dr. Williard is second-generation lineage of the methods and teachings of Ilse Middendorf, Carl Stau, and Irene Dowd. Dr. Williard holds a doctorate from the University of Kentucky, as well as degrees from Manhattan School of Music and UNC School of the Arts. He has served on the administration of both Manhattan School of Music and the Juilliard School. He has served as breathing specialist and lecturer for UNC School of the Arts, NYU Tisch School of the Arts, Rider University, UNC Chapel Hill, to name a few. And with that, please join me in ascending a warm, welcoming energy through the digital highway to our guest, Dr. Williard.
Hello, everyone. It's really great to be here today and to talk about things that are really special to my heart. A lot of this is going to be my research, some storytelling. I'm going to talk about how I got into this path. It was a little unexpected, so I'll start there, and then we'll slowly start to dive into what I'm going to start with is vocal wellness post-COVID. It is creating reparation and harmony between the inner and outer voice. So I got into this path. I had finished my coursework at University of Kentucky, and I had gone to Berlin, and I wanted to look for management. I wasn't quite sure what to write as far as my dissertation. And I started working with a few agents and talking with them of where I was in my singing as far as how we were going to proceed with getting out into the opera world in Germany. And the feedback that I kept getting was, you're not quite in your body. You're not quite in your body. And after 2 or 3 times, I started to really pay attention to that. And it was a little surprising feedback because I felt really good about my training in the US, and I felt really good about the apprenticeships and the regional work that I had done. And so as a base to really be told that you're not in your body it's a little bit, okay, what's the disconnect here? Help me find the disconnect. So I started working with a guy in Berlin. His name was John Norris. Some of you may know John Norris. And we started working getting into the pelvic floor and into the lower body. And I remember that moment. It was really a huge aha for me because I could feel all the disconnect from my singing, which had to do with childhood, which had to do with all of these different parts that lived inside of me. And at that point, I just wanted to know what that was because I knew there was something missing in the training, something that, not that a voice teacher should have brought me into that place, but there's an intimate relationship with the breath, an intimacy within the heart. And so I decided to stop singing, actually. And I wanted to just look at what is the meaning behind the breath? What is that? I started studying at the Middendorf Institute and started diving into a lot of somatic practices, a lot of what am I feeling? What am I sensing? How is the breath moving inside of me? How is the breath moving outside of me? And I thought, wow, this would be a great dissertation. So I talked to my committee, but there wasn't enough of the mind, the function, the structure. And so I went to Carl Stau's method, breathing coordination, and started working with Lynn Martin. And that gave me everything that I needed, this balance of structure, function, and emotion. And that also gave me the entryway to really feel where this was lining up with the area of voice. So I did a study at the North Carolina School of the Arts. I looked at their participants that were all voice majors, and it was like watching my own mirror. of my own internal process. So at the end of that study, there were 3 pillars of the voice. In order for them to have a voice out in the world, it wasn't about, oh, the breath should be this way, the technique should be this way. It came really down to that social science aspect. I need to have a relationship with self. I need to have a relationship with how to be vulnerable with my voice. And I need to have a relationship with self-confidence so I can stand up and express these parts of me. That really laid the foundation for my work. But I had not done enough inner processing work to really be able to bring this method and process into fruition because I had a lot of healing I needed to do. So I traveled a good bit around the world working with indigenous healers, looking at alternative ways to start to peel away the layers. And that really set forth my work today, which we're going to talk about right now. So I want to share my screen. Before we dive into this, I want to watch the still face experiment. And I'm going to play a little YouTube clip actually. So let's see if I can do that. All right. Okay.
Babies this young are extremely responsive to the emotions and the reactivity and the social interaction that they get from the world around them. This is something that we started studying 30, 40 years ago when people didn't think that infants could engage in social interaction. In the still face experiment, what the mother did was she sits down and she's playing with her baby who's about a year of age.
I'm like a girl. Oh.
And she gives a greeting to the baby gives a greeting back to her. This baby starts pointing at different places in the world, and the mother's trying to engage her and play with her. They're working to coordinate their emotions and their intentions, what they want to do in the world. And that's really what the baby is used to. And then we ask the mother to not respond to the baby. The baby very quickly picks up on this, and then she uses all of her abilities to try and get the mother back. She smiles at the mother. She points because she's used to the mother looking where she points. The baby puts both hands up in front of her and says, "What's happening here?" She makes that screechy sound at the mother, like, "Come on, why aren't we doing this?" Even in this 2 minutes, when they don't get the normal reaction, they react with negative emotions. They turn away. They feel the stress of it. They actually may lose control of their posture because of the stress that they're experiencing.
Okay. I'm here. And what are you doing? Oh, yes. Oh, what a big girl.
It's a little like the good, the bad, and the ugly. The good is that normal stuff that goes on, that we all do with our kids. The bad is when something bad happens, but the infant can overcome it. After all, when you stop the still face, the mother and the baby start to play again. The ugly is when you don't give the child any chance to get back to the good. There's no reparation, and they're stuck in that really ugly situation.
So that's a lot to take in if you haven't seen that experiment. It really addresses what's often coming into the voice studio. When we're looking at posturing, when we're looking at resonance, all of those vowels, all of those screams and cries, they still live in us. It's how we learn how to make this part of our face work. But if we grew up in trauma and this was what we were around, then this is the face we use to express ourselves, even with our colleagues. And then if you start to look how COVID covered all of that, that really lets us know where the movement is post-COVID for the work in the studio. It is in looking at the nervous system. It is in, are the posturings in fight flight or appease please? Or is there collapse submit that's also part of that process that's within themselves, of ways to keep themselves safe and to hide? So this is some of the stuff that I was unraveling. And I didn't realize that when I first started the breath. So as you build an intimacy with the breath, rather than consuming the breath as a marketplace or putting it to use and doing these more of a control aspect, rather than what does it feel like in here? How do we get this balance between freedom of tension and release in the thoracic cavity and the lower abdominals? That all is dependent on all of those 18 years up to them getting into the studio. So some of the questions I ask immediately is, have you had any traumas? Have you had any injuries? Did you play any instruments? Was there any bullying? Because these things affect the quality of the voice, the quality of the body, and the quality of the breath. So part of working in this way is a somatic way of working and starting to be able to bring safety into the body. If I had to say there's one requirement for the voice, it is safety. It has to be safety because that has to be restored. So this brings us to the data, looking at vulnerability, relationship with self, and self-confidence. So here is us as teachers, here's the students as well. So we have this, I created the whole body as a heart because I really wanted to show that we have these two parts of us inside. This part of the inner voice, which is looking at our relationship with vulnerability, and also the part of the outer voice, which is looking at self-confidence. And we have the mind. We do need the mind. The mind is a very part of technique, how to go about to fix it, to be able to get from point A to Z. It's a very useful tool. But when it comes to the breath, we have to let the mind go so the breath can become free. So the breath, I love this image of doing like a seesaw, and the two parts of us sort of raising our hands in the air. So the breath is that seesaw, but the heart is what it balances on. So in a type of, whether it's Alexander, whether it's Feldenkrais, whether it's my method, it is about going inside and making the voice process an inside-out process so that we can start to create a deep relationship with the breath and heart. And that breath and heart relationship creates this balance between the inner and the outer voice. And that is how we build a relationship with self. So when we look at our relationship with the inner voice, we deeply have to start to create this relationship with safety. That is how we build that. Can I be vulnerable? Well, I need to be safe to be vulnerable. And we need to be safe in our universities where we teach. That's another part of looking at vocal wellness within the university programs. So then we have the outer voice. What do we need in order to build that self-confidence? We need trust. We need to be able to build trust from within ourselves. And when we have this relationship with safety and trust, and we can really trust the heart, we get this beautiful balance. And that happens just like when you were watching the still face video. It happens when we bring reparation, going inside and looking and coming at peace with oneself and at peace with one's breath and at peace with one's journey. And then we start to create this harmony. And yes, that's not the voice teacher's job, but it is part of when they come to the voice teacher, there is that parental type of transfer that does often happen. So knowing how to have conversations around these topics can be really important. And then you can see wow, maybe this student does need a psych referral. Maybe we should give them some support around really working through this so we can have both going in tandem. And then how is that harmony within the voice studio? How is that harmony within the administration again? So so that is really, I want to just sort of give you a moment so you can look at it. Again, looking at the mind, we need it, but we're going to let it go when we are really trying to sense and feel the breath. Again, this breath and heart coordination, bringing us into this balance of inner and outer voice and relationship with self, and the inner voice with vulnerability, and the outer voice with self-confidence. I want to talk about one of the study participants. This study participant had the heart removed at 6 months old. They needed to have heart surgery, and then the heart was put back in. So they removed it and then did what they needed to do, and then actually put the heart back in and started it up again. So a lot of the work that I do is hands-on, is on the table, and this was during a table session. And I was trying to restore safety to that area, but that part of the participant was so tense that in that moment it was about bringing safety into the body, letting the participant know this is a safe space. We can go there. We can look at all of these emotions. And the participants started to open the thoracic cavity. They started to get movement around the heart. Those intercostals started to let go. And then there was a lengthening of the thoracic cavity that I was able to get. And when that participant sat up and got off the table, they said, I don't really know who I am, but I know I'm not the participant that was starting out on that table. I heard from the voice teacher that evening that when the study participant got up to sing in master class, the voice was completely different, because all of that tension had been let go. See, the body keeps the score on everything. We can't escape it. So we can either look at it now, or we can look at it at the end of our lives. And so this, I always say, if you want to really know about the voice and go into the voice, it's really, what are you able to let go? What are you able to let die so that you can become more present with how you want your voice to be in the world? So I'm going to take this down and we're going to go into the 3 pillars of voice. So, excuse me while I move these around. Okay. Okay, so we are going to begin looking at the 3 pillars of voice. Okay, and I will not let my perfection get in the way of not overlapping that. So that's one of the things I've been working on letting go. All right, so 3 pillars of voice. There's a really important story that I have to tell before I start with this, and let me just make sure if I can lift that just a little bit. So I'm going to show you. So when I was in the middle of all this, I really, after the Mindorf Institute, I thought, I don't have enough to write a dissertation. I really want to do this work to find more of myself and who that little boy was that wanted to go sing. And my grandmother got sick and I left Berlin. And she said she found out she had stage 4 cancer and she was gone within a month. And that process with her, I watched her breathe as she started to let go. And I saw how important the breath was. And I was like, it's our first relationship. The breath is our first relationship before our parents. And it is our last relationship. So why don't we make a relationship with the breath? And that sent me back to Berlin after she passed. But she gave me her jewelry box, a little beat up jewelry box. But when I was 6, I went into her room and no one was there. And I lifted up this beautiful box and it had this lovely mirror and I was like, oh, I love the light. And then she had her, just a plastic pearl earrings and a necklace. And I have those, but I put them on. And when I put them on, I remember feeling how beautiful I was in that moment. I didn't know about gender. I didn't know about, whether I was a boy or a girl. That didn't even occur to me at 6. All I knew is how beautiful I was in that mirror. And then I heard someone coming down the hall. And I quickly put them back in the jewelry box and shut it. And I say this really became my box for the next 20 years, maybe 25. I would call that more like a coffin and not a jewelry box. So when I met the breath, I talk about, it was meeting the breath for the first time. When I met the breath in Berlin, I realized that I started voice to open up the jewelry box. And that's what I found in the study participants. When I looked at the NCSA students, checking 8 to 10, 0 to 10, how many people thought they could have career potential? Only 58.5% checked 8 or above. Only 58.5. But after having a week of going into their bodies and experiencing it and coming into this space of, wow, this is what it means to be in these skin suits, that rose to 86.2. That big of an increase of bringing somatic processing work in. And they saw that change the voices pretty much immediately. So it was important to tell that story about that necklace because when it came to teaching my data, here lives the necklace now. It lives right here within the data. So how do we make a necklace? So we need a hook, we need an eye, and we need a hook and we need a string. So that's how we're going to start to learn about self-confidence, vulnerability, and relationship with self. So here's our body. We start out when we're in our mother's womb. We are starting out, the body starts to form, and then all of a sudden, this relationship with self starts to come into the body. We actually develop a relationship, start to feel the self. We don't have breath yet, but we remember sometimes those posturings, what our mother was going through, what she was eating. It informs us so much. So there's that relationship with self is the string. So this is the string of self. And then as we start to move around, and if we're building the necklace, we got to have a hook. That's where our breath comes in. And once breath and body and the self come together, it produces this beautiful sound, which is usually crying. And I did not have the crying when I came out. I was 2 months premature with a right lung collapse, and they had to submerge me underwater in order to get me breathing. So the breath is very dear to me in that. I'm grateful for this journey with that. So what are all the pearls, or what are all the beads on the string? They are our vulnerability. This moment-to-moment relationship with this emotional, breathing body that holds our race, our gender, our sexuality, our past traumas, our expressions, our identity. It holds all of that. And for me, that is everything that lives in the world that people see. So my job as a human, for me personally, is to be able to open myself and for you to really be able to see who I am with all of these parts. And believe me, I have had some ugly parts along the way, and I have had to bring them into this relationship with beauty so that I really got to see, wow, those actually were my greatest gifts along this way. So those live in that's our vulnerability. So if you were looking at a necklace, you might say, oh, well, she has a diamond necklace, she has a pearl necklace, he has a turquoise necklace, which I have. And we can say, start to identify these as, oh, this or that. Well, the string doesn't live in this or that. So part of looking at that relationship is being able to see, really, we're all just strings. We're not all these different things. But we have to be able to see the breath, and I want to explain that, because the breath doesn't know this or that. The breath doesn't know black, white, gay, straight. The breath is rooted in oneness. It's rooted in harmony. It's rooted in balance. It knows how to get us to reparation, that healing that needs to happen, even within the voice studio. So I want to then we're going to do this together, but I'm going to go through a little more. So what is this self-confidence? Self-confidence is your ability to put on the necklace. It is your ability to be able to be in the world and to trust that. Again, safety and the balance and trust. So if we look over here, here is the jewelry box. So what I was striving and really wanting in that beginning time in Berlin was to really find myself, which is starting to learn that that jewelry box could actually be a jewelry box. That it actually had this relationship with my heart and feeling and sensing and reparation and harmony. But then I had to also look at the mind and the thinking and the fixing, the perfection. I had to look at the injuries, the blockages, the energetic blockages, the disharmony. And what this builds, even in our teaching, it builds a false self-confidence and a sense of self. That false sense of self, that false sense of confidence. And believe me, I was able to go through that world with that false sense. But it wasn't enough for me to stand on, like that previous picture of the heart standing, that had both feet under him or her or they. So I want us to start to begin to do some of this work together since we're gathered here. And maybe we can, I would like for everyone to try to turn on their cameras so we can do some process work. And I know they're going to stop recording, but I want to thank everyone that has watched this far. It has really been an honor just to be able to share all the stuff that came out of the data and research. If you want to get in touch with me, you can email me at Williard Method or go to williardmethod.com, and you can find me there and just send me an email. I'd be happy to talk about my data and happy to talk about the process and just have some one-on-one FaceTime. So